Welcome back. You're watching the Jacksonville History Show. I'm Harry Reagan, and Emily has changed seats, figuratively. She is the interviewee now, not the interviewer.
So now I'm nervous.
Yes.
I was okay before.
And so we have a few things to talk about. Summertime in Jacksonville,
yes,
historically. Summertime, let's say for sure, was not as comfortable in the old days. A lot of people went to North Carolina or someplace.
Those who were here in the summer and had any money or means would go to cooler climes typically, and that's why, of course, for much of the 19th century following the Civil War, Jacksonville was known as this great tourist mecca. And then as that persona changed and the town would change what we really were, and we weren't a great tourist town anymore, you know, more and more people stayed here in the summer, and the town grew, so there were more of a population base. And when we tell about the city's history, we often forget to tell about some of those major events that happened in our summers when the town tended to be less populated. And there were some major ones.
Of course, what we're talking about to some extent, the focus was at the beach.
Much was.
And we're going to take a look at some photos, which some people will remember, and some people may see it for the first time. But
well, this gets us into the 20th century, many of these, yes.
And so the beach, we'll take a look at some of there was a lot of activity out there, a roller coaster, and well, we're taking a look at it now.
And let me, so here you're in, you know, well into the 20s or 30s, and so many people remember the roller coaster. At the time, it was the first coaster, it was, excuse me, not the first, far from the first coaster in Florida, but the only roller coaster in Florida. Actually, Jacksonville had had this is, you know, into the 20s here, and Jacksonville had had a roller coaster in 1907.
And we have to remember that Jacksonville was a destination for summer vacations for people. This is pre-Miami becoming much of a destination.
Absolutely.
Because airline travel was not what it is today, so it was harder to get to Miami.
That's right. Miami was just barely beginning to take off at this point. And in fact, it's so funny when you think about it. In 1901, Jacksonville had a population of about 30,000. Miami, 1,500 people. So just a blip.
And I think we've got some more photos we can take a look at. There's a great photo of the roller coaster.
And, you know, those automobiles on the beach, which...
That's another historical element.
Absolutely.
Cars can't go on the beach anymore.
Absolutely. And...
now, this is another historical photo.
This is 1921, the dead summer. It's July 1 of 1921, and this is the opening of the St. Johns River Bridge, later would be renamed the Acosta. We since tore down this bridge and built another one, but this is the first time people could go all the way without taking a ferry to get to the other side and then make their way down to the beach.
So this was the first Acosta Bridge.
First Acosta Bridge.
Now it's been torn down and replaced by a new Acosta Bridge.
And it was only 10 years earlier than this, in 1910, that the Atlantic Boulevard opened to get people all the way to the beach in this twisting, turning road.
It was a trip.
A huge, and it was considered by some the first highway in Florida, Atlantic Boulevard, not even a straight shot, very curved.
And we're back at the beach there.
Yes,
that's a famous landmark also.
The pier at the beach, and again all the cars. What's kind of interesting, in 1992, that recent, in Daytona, an 18-foot rogue wave came ashore and wiped out some automobiles that were actually on the beach in Daytona. You know how cars have been on the beach long since in Daytona, I assume still are. And I don't know of too many rogue waves in Jacksonville, even when we've had a little bit of earthquake activity. There's been a little bit of that.
And there's some of the crowds at the beach.
And look at people dressed up on the boardwalk.
Yeah, and we probably in the summertime and not all that comfortable.
That would not be, and I question maybe that wasn't the dead of summer, but the boardwalk was open, and typically it did keep summer hours.
But people dressed up more.
Yes, yes.
Even on vacation.
Absolutely.
This was before the era of Bermuda shorts and so forth.
I mean, well, I'm old, but I grew up in the era where you wore gloves downtown.
Right.
And dressed up.
But now you mentioned earthquake, and That's something that we don't think about much on the East Coast, but there was a historical earthquake in Charleston.
There was indeed the great earthquake of 1886, and the Jacksonville Historical Society is going to kick off their speaker series in September the 13th at Historical St. Andrews. Everybody is welcome to attend. It's a free program with the author of a book on that subject, Richard Cote. And it will be the 125th anniversary of the August 31st, 1886 great earthquake of Charleston. And of course, people were not just shocked by the shocks and aftershocks, they were just shocked by the idea of this, this phenomena that you can have this major earthquake on the East Coast, east of the Mississippi, and was the largest earthquake east of the Mississippi.
How bad was it?
Well, it devastated the majority of Charleston within 60 seconds. The buildings were down. 2/3 of the people were left homeless within that 60 seconds to 10 minutes. It was just, the town was leveled, and you could feel the tremors in Jacksonville, Florida from this. In fact, you could feel them as far south as Cuba and all the way up into Ohio, New York. So this was a major earthquake. And on this 125th anniversary, I think will be very interesting to tell about it. And Jacksonville, there was in Jacksonville, not only were all these aftershocks for roughly a month, they just continued. They also cited all the way down the St. Johns River. The water was elevated with this sort of rushing tide from the earthquake. At least that was reported, some sort of special tidal wave all the way into the St. Johns.
Now, you're not an expert in this, I guess.
No,
you're
I'm
not a scientist, but
I'm not.
Is earthquake still likely in this part of the world?
That, according to the man who is coming to speak to the Historical Society on September 13th, they're not likely.
Yeah.
They will happen, and they will happen on the East Coast again, is what he tells me in an interview I've had with him.
Maybe not quite as likely as California, but
perhaps not. And these, the type of earthquake that happened in Charleston was something intraseismic rather than inter, and apparently that is a much rarer earthquake, so it was more surprising. Nonetheless, I will tell you this, which really shocked me. I researched a little bit just last night and found out there were 17 earthquakes around the world yesterday. Now, these are recordable by scientists, earthquakes, obviously not reportable in the news.
and not in areas where people are killed and
Exactly.
so forth,
So we had this 1886 one that we could feel it here. Now, in October 31st of 1900, there was one big enough here in Jacksonville, Florida. It didn't cause any damage, but it made the New York Times in news article, and it talked about 8 tremors of major size, the 7th one being really dramatic, and the population was frightened. I mean, they thought that cannon fire was going on at first, causing this tremor, but it was indeed earthquake.
So the earthquake is the first of a series of, this will be the 2011-12 programs.
It will. That's in the series. We plan to have one on auto racing at the beach. We plan to have another one on a horror film made here in Jacksonville, showing that, of course, appropriately in October. So we have a great program series. It's not all on our website yet, but it will be on our website soon. So viewers should check that out. And we will have about a 12-part series this year, maybe more.
And there's usually a standing room only crowd at a program. It's at Old St. Andrews,
It is.
across the street from the arena.
Typically they're there. We might have the October one, and we're planning to about a block away at the old Florida Casket Factory, an appropriate setting for such a film. So most are on site or very close by, and all this can be found out, you know, at www.jackshistory.com.
Exactly, and when you go to a program, there's refreshments and a great program on local history.
And typically, while we keep the programs, I think, very interesting and lively, it's not always information that people are familiar with. I mean, who would know the Great Charleston earthquake of 1886 actually, if it maybe didn't have a physical impact in Jacksonville, but certainly a mental impact, and a mental impact at the time all the way along the East Coast. People were genuinely frightened and realized this world and the world of nature is a precarious thing.
Now, you can get in to a program if you're not a member of the
Yes, you can.
Historical Society. However, we do advise it.
We love it and we encourage it. And most people who come to our programs become members because they want to know about these interesting aspects of Jacksonville history.
And it's a good opportunity to go and see and then become a member.
It is. Yeah, and I'll mention one other program we're having this year. It's the 70th anniversary of Pearl Harbor. So we will have a program, and we're going to, it will be Jacksonville's response to Pearl Harbor. And that program will be very interesting with music of the era, with some of the images of Jacksonville at the time of World War II, and there are many available. So that's another interesting program that I think people ought to watch out for.
Sometimes, I'm sure you've had this conversation, you talk to people who say, well, I don't care that much about history. And I think that's almost not true of anybody. If you care about anything, it has a history, and you'd be interested in it. You just have to think about, you know, what you're thinking about is a kind of preconceived notion about what history is. And we have a broader definition of history. We try to include a lot of things that people would be interested in.
Well, I know according to research, we are a nation of history illiterates. I do know that. But in my milieu, most people amaze me with their interest in what they know, but that's my milieu. I think that as people discover the history and delve into the history, and I think when they hear history through the stories of a place, through the stories of people, it changes perspective. And that's typically what they'll hear if they come to a Jacksonville Historical Society program. Not just a bunch of facts and figures, but the real stories of events and people and places. And it's really history alive.
And there's an opportunity when you go to shop for books. There's a great assortment of books, some published by the Historical Society and others by authors.
In fact, Richard Cote, when he comes on September 13th, this is really an author signing event as well. He'll be there, he'll sign books for people, he'll meet with people, and the bonus is he's giving a really serious and fun PowerPoint program in a grand, beautiful historic space in Jacksonville with its own story for everyone who comes. And as you say, just a good evening for everybody. I don't know where you get a better evening in Jacksonville where it's not a ticketed event.
Right. Well, that's all the time we have. Emily Liska, thank you for being with us. And that's our show for tonight. More information at 665-0064 or jackshistory.com. So long, everyone.